Clarity begins where attachment ends. In the philosophy of Stoicism, clarity is not a destination you reach. It is what naturally emerges when unnecessary weight is released from the mind. Imagine the mind as a clear lake. The more you stir it with desires, fears, and attachments, the cloudier it becomes. But when you let go, when the waters are still, clarity returns. Epictetus once said, "If you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid." At first glance, this may sound counterintuitive. Why would a wise person accept being seen as foolish? But what Epictetus is pointing to is something deeper than social acceptance. He is speaking of inner freedom, a mind that is no longer chained by the need for approval. We live in a world that constantly demands our attention and our validation. Social recognition, possessions, titles, opinions, these are the currencies of modern life. Yet to the Stoic, they are external things, not truly ours. The more tightly we cling to them, the less room we leave for clarity. Attachment in the Stoic sense is not love or appreciation, it is entanglement. It is the belief that our peace depends on things outside our control. When the mind depends on praise to feel worthy or on wealth to feel secure, it becomes fragile, easily shaken, always in need of something. Clarity, however, arises when we begin to let go, not of life itself, but of our false dependencies. The Stoic does not reject the world, but they refuse to be enslaved by it. They enjoy what comes, but are not shattered when it leaves. This gentle detachment is not coldness, it is wisdom. It is the understanding that what is not truly ours can never truly bring us peace. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to be indifferent to what makes no difference. What he meant was that clarity requires simplicity, an unburdened mind, free from the clutter of unnecessary concerns. When we stop trying to control what cannot be controlled, when we stop performing for others' approval, something remarkable happens. The mind becomes light. And in that lightness, we begin to see things as they are. This is why the Stoic path begins with letting go, not as a loss, but as liberation, not as a retreat, but as a return to oneself, to the natural state of a mind not pulled in every direction. There is a quiet power in someone who no longer needs to prove anything, who does not rely on applause to feel valuable, who does not crumble in the face of misunderstanding. This is not apathy, it is steadiness. It is the kind of strength that allows a person to move through the noise of life without becoming part of it. Seneca once wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. Much of that suffering comes from attachment to how we think life should be, to how we believe others should treat us, to the stories we tell ourselves about success and failure. The Stoic removes these layers not to live less, but to live more clearly. When the mind is free, it becomes still. When it is still, it becomes clear. And in that clarity, we find not only peace, but understanding. The kind that does not depend on intellect alone, but on alignment with nature, with virtue, with what is truly within us. The Stoic is not a person without emotion. They are a person whose emotions are not dictated by external chaos. They are not unmoved, but they are unshaken, because they have let go of needing things to be a certain way, because they no longer seek themselves in the mirror of other people's opinions. True clarity, then, is not gained. It is revealed, and it is revealed when the fog of attachment begins to lift, when the noise of need quiets down, when we stop grasping and start observing. Then, like a window freshly cleaned, the world becomes visible again, not distorted by desire, but luminous in its truth. To live clearly is not to have all the answers, but to carry fewer illusions, to walk lightly, to think freely, and most of all, to know that what is essential does not demand to be held tightly. It only asks to be seen. Clear thinking comes from understanding what's truly yours. One of the most powerful teachings in all of Stoic philosophy is astonishingly simple. Know what is yours and know what is not. This single distinction between what is within our control and what lies outside of it holds the key to a calm, focused, and clear mind. Epictetus, the great Stoic teacher, begins his Enchiridion with this exact lesson. He writes, "Some things are up to us and some are not." And from this foundation, the entire structure of Stoic thought is built. Because once we truly see this distinction, we stop wasting energy trying to control the uncontrollable. We stop clouding our minds with what doesn't belong to us. What then is truly ours? According to the Stoics, only a few things: our thoughts, our choices, our actions, and our responses. These are the inner tools that define who we are. Everything else, our body, our reputation, our possessions, even the opinions others hold of us may affect us, but they are not truly ours. They can change without our permission. They can be taken without our consent. And if we base our peace of mind on them, we build on sand. Clarity begins the moment we stop confusing the two. A person who lacks clarity will often find themselves anxious, frustrated, or exhausted, not because life is cruel, but because they are trying to bend the world to their will. They want people to behave a certain way. They want outcomes to unfold exactly as imagined. They want to control how they are seen, how they are treated, how the future plays out. But the more we grip what we cannot hold, the more tangled our thinking becomes. The Stoic mind, by contrast, is clear not because it knows everything, but because it knows its boundaries. It understands that effort belongs to us, but outcomes do not. That intentions are ours, but reactions from others are not. That we can offer kindness, but we cannot demand it be returned. This way of seeing does not make us passive, it makes us precise. It returns us to what we can actually shape: the quality of our thoughts, the virtue in our actions, the honesty of our choices. And in doing so, it frees us. As Epictetus put it, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. There is something quietly revolutionary about this idea. In a world that tells us to control more, gain more, and master everything, Stoicism reminds us that control is not power. It is illusion, unless it begins within. The person who chases control over others is often at the mercy of their own turmoil. But the person who governs themselves, who understands what truly belongs to them, walks through the world with clarity. You can feel the difference. A mind that constantly chases external validation is restless, easily shaken, and often conflicted. It shifts with every change in circumstance. But a mind grounded in what is truly its own is steady. It does not rely on headlines, on approval, or on the future behaving a certain way. It finds direction from within. This is not detachment from life. It is engagement with life from a place of strength. When we stop clinging to what isn't ours, we begin to show up more fully in what is. Our conversations become more honest, our decisions more deliberate, our emotions more balanced. We no longer react blindly, we respond with thought. And that difference, though subtle, transforms everything. The Stoics were not born wise, they struggled as we do. But they practiced this one distinction until it became second nature. They reminded themselves every day that storms may come, but they always have a choice in how to sail. That insults may be hurled, but they alone decide whether to feel injured. That fortune may rise or fall, but virtue remains in their hands. And that, in the end, is the most precious thing we possess: our character, our integrity, our way of thinking. Everything else is borrowed, everything else is passing. When we return to what is truly ours, we step out of confusion and into clarity. We stop resisting reality and start living in harmony with it. We stop wasting energy on what we cannot command and begin using that energy to shape our thoughts, refine our values, and walk our path with peace. Because in the end, it's not how much you hold on to, but how well you understand what can never be taken away. The calm mind is the just mind. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The mind free from passions is a fortress. It is an image both poetic and practical, a stronghold, untouched by storms, unmoved by siege." But what kind of storm was he referring to? Not the outer chaos of politics or war, but the inner turbulence of emotion: anger, ambition, envy, resentment. These are the passions that shake the mind from within. These are the tempests that compromise clarity. To the Stoic, mental calm is not merely a state of relaxation, it is a reflection of justice. When the mind is just, it is clear. When it is unjust, it is clouded. We often think of justice as something external, something measured by courts, systems, or societal rules. But for the Stoics, justice begins inward. It is a principle that must first shape our thoughts before it can guide our actions. Strong emotions distort perception. Anger, for instance, narrows the field of vision. It makes enemies where none exist. It rushes to judgment, inflates grievances, and mistakes cruelty for strength. Envy corrodes the ability to appreciate goodness in others. Ambition, untethered from virtue, leads the mind to justify anything for the sake of gain. In all these cases, reason is eclipsed. And when reason dims, clarity fades. A mind at war with itself cannot see the world clearly. It misinterprets motives, It projects fears, it lives in reaction, and above all, it struggles to distinguish what is right from what is merely desirable. That is why the Stoics viewed emotional discipline not as self-denial, but as the foundation of wisdom. A tranquil mind is not a dead one, it is a balanced one, capable of fairness because it is not driven by inner chaos. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to examine his judgments and intentions with care. He believed that true strength lies in ruling the self, not others. When a man governs his passions, he is not cold, he is clear. He sees beyond his own desires. He treats others not as tools or threats, but as fellow beings sharing the same breath of nature. This is justice in its truest form. It is tempting to imagine that fairness requires rules, systems, or consequences, and in the external world, those things matter. But in the Stoic tradition, fairness is not enforced, it is chosen. It arises from a commitment to truth over preference, to understanding over reaction. A just person does not seek revenge. They do not nurse old wounds. They do not act in anger, even when they are right to be upset. Why? Because justice is not about being right, it is about seeing clearly. And no one sees clearly through a storm of rage. The calm mind is not indifferent, it is awake. It knows that fairness cannot exist without inner order, that the ability to be just toward others begins with being just toward oneself. To not lie, to not cheat, to not twist reality for comfort. These are small acts of internal justice, and each one strengthens the fortress of the mind. Seneca, too, warned against letting the passions rule. He saw how easily a man could lose his sense of right and wrong when pride or pain had the upper hand. That is why the Stoics placed such importance on pausing before acting, on reflecting before responding. They understood that a moment of reflection could prevent a day of regret. That calm is not weakness, it is moral clarity. A just mind does not mean a perfect one. The Stoics never claimed to be flawless, but they believed that striving for justice within, by checking emotion, listening to reason, and holding fast to virtue, was the path to lasting peace. They were not motivated by rules handed down from above, but by a deep understanding that injustice, even in thought, distorts the lens of perception. It makes enemies of neighbors. It makes burdens out of simple moments. It hides truth behind the veil of opinion. And so, to live with a calm mind is not simply feel good. It is to be able to judge wisely, to choose rightly, and to act with fairness, even when the world does not. The calm mind sees more. It rushes less. It is not swayed by every insult or temptation. It has room to think and space to care. The world may be noisy, unfair, and often confusing. But the Stoic learns that clarity does not come from fixing the world. It comes from becoming the kind of person who can walk through it justly, with a mind free from passion, standing like a fortress, open to the truth, and grounded in peace. Truth is simple, but the ego complicates it. Seneca once wrote, "It is not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it." These words are not a condemnation of time itself, but of how we choose to spend it, especially when our minds are pulled into unnecessary complexity, driven not by understanding but by ego. In its purest form, truth is simple. It does not shout. It does not demand to be dressed in cleverness or cloaked in performance. It simply is. Yet for many of us, this simplicity feels almost uncomfortable. We complicate what is clear. We overthink the obvious. We add layers where none are needed. Not because the world is too complex, but because our ego is too involved. The ego does not seek clarity. It seeks validation. It wants to appear intelligent, to impress, to dominate. It dresses up ideas in elaborate language. It turns straightforward choices into intellectual puzzles. It seeks not truth, but recognition. And in doing so, it muddies the waters that Stoicism works so hard to clear. The Stoics, by contrast, prized simplicity, not as a rejection of depth, but as a mark of true understanding. To think simply is not to think poorly. It is to think with precision. It is to cut through illusion, distraction, and self-importance. When Marcus Aurelius journaled in his quiet moments, he did not write to impress. He wrote to remember what mattered, to remind himself that life is short, that virtue is enough, that truth does not change when the spotlight moves. Seneca, too, saw the cost of unnecessary complexity. He observed how much time people waste decorating their thoughts instead of directing them, how we bury truth under layers of cleverness, forgetting that wisdom needs no ornament. A simple life to the Stoic is not a small life. It is a focused one, free from the noise that ego creates. This clarity does not come easily. The world encourages complication. Success is often measured by how intricate one's plans are, how sophisticated one's ideas appear. We fear being misunderstood as simple-minded, so we overcompensate. We use complexity to protect our pride, to prove our worth, to guard against judgment. But the Stoic knows the wisest people are rarely the loudest. They are not concerned with appearing brilliant, they are concerned with seeing clearly. They know that truth does not need to be defended by decoration, that what is real does not become more real by being admired. To embrace simplicity, then, is to take a quiet step away from the ego. It is to let go of the need to impress. It is to ask not, how can I be seen as wise, but what is the simplest, truest thing here? The answer may not be comfortable, but it will be honest, and in honesty, clarity is born. Think of how many arguments arise not from disagreement, but from pride. How many decisions become harder not because they are complex, but because our ego is attached to the outcome. We want to win, we want to be right, we want to be admired, and in wanting all these things, we stop seeing what is true. The Stoic strips away those layers. They return to what is essential, not out of laziness, but out of discipline. Not because they lack understanding, but because they value it enough to keep it clean. They do not waste time pretending to know more than they do. They are not afraid to admit what is unclear. In this way, they move through life lightly, with fewer burdens, fewer illusions, and greater peace. Simplicity is not about minimalism in appearance. It is about integrity in thought. It is about aligning what we believe with what we do. It is about refusing to be drawn into the performance of being wise, and instead living with quiet wisdom. A mind that lets go of ego becomes a mind that sees truly. It does not decorate reality, it lives in it. There is a profound freedom in that. When we no longer need to prove anything, we are free to understand. When we are not driven by ego, we are guided by insight. And when we choose simplicity over spectacle, we make space for clarity to return, softly, like light through an open window. A quiet mind comes from accepting reality as it is. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "If you are pained by external things, it is not they that disturb you, but your judgment of them." These words, simple on the surface, hold within them the quiet revolution of Stoic thought. The world, he reminds us, is not what unsettles us. What unsettles us is how we choose to see it. The Stoic mind does not seek to fight the world, it seeks to understand it, to flow with it, to see reality clearly, not as we wish it to be, but as it is. And in doing so, it finds peace. Not because life becomes easier, but because our resistance to life softens. What disturbs us most is rarely the thing itself. It is the inner tension of wishing it were different. This is a truth the Stoics return to again and again. Reality, for them, was not an enemy to be defeated. It was a landscape to be navigated, a set of conditions to work with, not against. The wind blows, the rain falls, people come and go, fortune rises and collapses. This is nature. This is life. And to fight what is simply because we don't like it is to invite suffering without change. It's not surrender, it's clarity. The Stoic does not passively accept injustice, but they do not waste their energy raging at inevitability. They do not spend hours in mental anguish over things they cannot undo. Instead, they respond where they can, with calm and presence. They allow what must be allowed and act where action has meaning. Acceptance, in this sense, is not weakness. It is strength without noise. It is the courage to meet life where it stands, not where we wish it would wait for us. To accept is not to stop caring. It is to stop clinging. It is to understand that peace comes not from bending the world to our expectations, but from adjusting our expectations to fit what the world has shown us. And when we do that, when we finally stop wrestling with reality, something shifts. The mind becomes quiet, not dull, but clear, not passive, but at ease. There is no longer a desperate need to label every moment as good or bad, fair or unfair. There is just life unfolding. And in that unfolding, we find room to breathe. Much of our inner chaos comes from the illusion that we are in control of everything, but we are not. The Stoics knew this. They spoke often of fate, of nature, of the vast unfolding of time beyond our comprehension. And rather than fear it, they made peace with it. They reminded themselves that even pain, even loss, is part of the great order, that the same nature which brings the sun also brings the storm. Marcus Aurelius, who ruled an empire and faced countless hardships, wrote not of changing the world, but of changing the way we meet it. You have power over your mind, he said, not outside events. And in this power lies our refuge. When we stop insisting that reality bend to our preferences, we begin to see more clearly what our part is, what is ours to do, what is ours to let go. The modern world often encourages resistance, push harder, want more, fix everything. But the Stoic invites us into another space, a quieter space, one where peace is not found through domination, but through alignment, through seeing clearly, choosing wisely, and accepting gently. It's easy to confuse acceptance with giving up. But in the Stoic tradition, acceptance is the beginning of wise action. You cannot act well in a world you refuse to see. You cannot respond wisely to a reality you resent. But if you can meet life with openness, without judgment, without insistence, then you are finally free to move forward with clarity and strength. The mind that accepts reality as it is becomes like still water, able to reflect the world without distortion. It does not panic, it does not grasp, it does not curse the rain, it listens, it adjusts, it flows, and in that flow there is peace, not because the world is quiet, but because we are. Mental clarity requires moral clarity. Seneca once wrote, "No man can live a happy life or even a supportable life without the study of wisdom and virtue." To the Stoics, this was not a poetic exaggeration. It was the very foundation of a well-ordered mind. Because in a world filled with shifting values, urgent demands, and tempting shortcuts, moral clarity is the compass that keeps us steady. When our inner code is undefined, the mind becomes crowded. We hesitate. We second-guess. We chase one thing today and another tomorrow, pulled by trends, public opinion, or the fear of missing out. There's no stability, only reaction. And in that reaction, clarity dissolves. The Stoic does not live like this. They begin not by asking, what will bring me success, but rather, what is the right thing to do? That question clears the fog. It simplifies the options. Because when virtue becomes the guiding light, when wisdom, courage, justice, and temperance define our direction, decisions become less about gain and more about growth. Imagine someone who lacks this foundation. Each situation demands not just a choice, but a personal reinvention. What do I want today? What will make me look better? What will give me more approval, more advantage? The mind is consumed not with truth, but with strategy. It's always negotiating, always shifting, always tired. This is not clarity, it's confusion disguised as cleverness. Seneca, like all Stoics, believed that virtue was not an accessory to life. It was the structure of it. A person without virtue may achieve wealth, fame, or influence, but they will struggle to rest. They will carry a constant noise inside. The noise of compromise, regret, fear of exposure. There can be no calm in a mind that is always editing its own principles. But moral clarity, the quiet certainty that you have acted rightly, brings with it an extraordinary lightness. Not because you always succeed, but because you are no longer divided within yourself. You do not betray your own conscience. You do not live with the strain of pretending. You are at peace with your path, even if it is difficult. The Stoics did not equate virtue with perfection. They knew how flawed and human we all are, but they also believed that striving toward moral clarity was essential, not for others, for oneself. Because a life built on virtue is the only life where the mind can rest without apology. When we live by our values, we no longer need to calculate every moment for advantage. We no longer ask, what will they think? Or what if I lose? We ask only, is this in line with my character? And that one question silences many others. It reduces the emotional static. It quiets the noise of competing desires. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself to live in accordance with nature, not the nature of impulse, but the deeper nature of reason and virtue. When we live in harmony with what we know is right, we feel stable, even when life around us is not. When we violate that harmony, we feel unsettled, no matter how much we gain. In modern times, we're often encouraged to be flexible with our values, to bend, adapt, compromise when necessary. But to the Stoic, the true strength lies not in bending with every wind, but in knowing what should never bend. Moral clarity gives us a center, and from that center we can act, calmly, wisely, without regret. It's not always easy. The world will tempt you to trade virtue for reward. It will applaud you for being clever, not kind. It will test your patience, your courage, your fairness. But these tests are not burdens. They are opportunities to become clear, not just about who you are, but about who you are becoming. A clear mind is not just an intellectual gift, it is a moral achievement. It belongs to the person who has stopped wrestling with their conscience, who does not need to justify, excuse, or hide, who has chosen to build their life on principles that do not change with circumstance. And in that steadiness, there is clarity, a clarity that no noise can disturb, no failure can take away, because it does not come from the world, it comes from within. Clarity is found in the present, not in the what-ifs. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "Do not disturb yourself by imagining your whole life at once." These few words carry the quiet weight of wisdom, offering a remedy to one of the greatest sources of mental fog in the modern world, our obsession with the future. The mind loses its clarity not in what is happening, but in what might happen. We ask, what if this goes wrong? What if they leave? What if I fail? What if I never become who I want to be? These questions do not guide us, they scatter us. They fill the mind with smoke, making it difficult to see the next step, let alone the path ahead. The Stoics understood that the only place where clarity can truly exist is in the present, not in the remembered past, which we can no longer change, not in the imagined future, which may never come, but here, now, in this breath, in this decision, in this moment of awareness. To live constantly in the what-ifs is to live in a fog of illusion, because the future is not something we can control, it is only something we can meet. The more we try to manage what hasn't happened yet, the more we detach from what is already happening. And when we are not rooted in the present, we lose our ability to think clearly, act wisely, and feel peace. The Stoic does not reject planning or foresight. They value preparation, but they do not confuse it with anxiety. They do not obsess over outcomes. They do not try to live tomorrow before today is complete, because they know that reason, our highest faculty, can only operate in the here and now. What does it mean to live in the present then? It means to pay attention, to become still enough to notice what is true right now, without fleeing into fantasy or fear. It means asking, what is mine to do in this moment? Not what I wish were different, not what I dread will come, just what is here. And here there's often more than enough. There is breath, there is choice, there is dignity in doing the next right thing. The mind that returns to the present is not naive, it is grounded. It sees things as they are, not as they might be in some imagined uncontrollable future. To the Stoics, this return to the present was not an escape, it was an act of courage. It is easy to fantasize, to worry, to dwell. It is harder to remain where we are, to face the moment directly without drama. But that is where strength is forged. That is where calm is cultivated. So many of our emotional storms arise not from reality, but from projections. We anticipate failure, rejection, disaster, and in doing so, we suffer twice. Once in imagination, and once, possibly, in reality. Seneca wrote of this too: we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The Stoic mind sees this clearly and chooses not to suffer unnecessarily. There is a quiet power in choosing to live this way. It means we are no longer enslaved by fear. We are no longer paralyzed by possibilities. We are available to life, to its beauty, its simplicity, its lessons. Even when things go wrong, we can respond from clarity because we are not caught in what could have been. We are anchored in what is. Living in the present does not mean ignoring the future. It means not being consumed by it. It means preparing with reason, but releasing with grace. It means holding tomorrow lightly and holding today fully, because today is all we ever truly have. And in it lies every opportunity to live with clarity, purpose, and peace. The Stoics did not promise that life would be predictable, but they did offer a compass. Stay with what is real. Stay with what is now. Because when the mind stops reaching forward or looking back, when it returns gently to this very moment, clarity is no longer something we chase. It becomes something we carry. And in this stillness, this complete presence, we are finally able to see. When the mind aligns with nature, it becomes clear. Clarity is not something we acquire once and for all. It is something we return to again and again. In a world full of distractions, chaos, and demands, the Stoics offer not a system of escape, but a way to stay grounded. They remind us that peace of mind is not found in perfect conditions, but in a well-governed soul. Through the teachings of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, we learn that mental clarity is not merely intellectual, it is moral, it is spiritual. It is the result of living in alignment with what is true, essential, and within our power. It begins when we loosen our grip on attachments, when we focus on what is ours to control, when we choose justice over reaction, simplicity over ego, acceptance over resistance. To think clearly is to live clearly. And clarity does not come from knowing everything. It comes from knowing what matters. It comes from seeing the noise and choosing stillness, from seeing the storm and choosing calm, from feeling the pull to flee the present and choosing instead to stay with what is. The Stoics never promised life would be easy, but they showed that the mind can be strong, steady, luminous, that even in chaos, a person can walk through the fog with eyes open, reason intact, and a heart unshaken by fear. So if the world feels loud, return to what is quiet. If the path feels tangled, return to what is true. If the mind feels clouded, return to the present, to virtue, to what is within you, because the clearest place you'll ever find is already within your reach.